What was your worst OFCK, I'm actually going to die moment? Mountain biking and I just about slipped off a 30-foot ledge. Barely caught myself. I was 15 and walking across a railroad bridge over a creek when I heard the train coming from around the curve. The bridge was not wide enough to stand to the side. I ran back the way I came, as fast as I could, with the train coming from behind. The railroad ties were the perfect length for my stride. As I got near the embankment, the ties suddenly became further apart and I tripped, banging my shin, and I couldn't get back up. I crawled the last 30 feet on my hands and knees, rolling off the track at the earliest point possible. A solid 90 seconds later the train came by. I had lots more time than I feared, but I was terrified during the run. My uncle and I were swimming around a bunch of rocks at the edge of a beach one time and it was super choppy. Big mistake because it got to the point where we wanted out and we couldn't swim the way we came because the tide was ripping way too much our way. So we tried to get up on the rocks. My uncle got stuck in some fishing line that was left there and I was a bit further down. Got dumped right into a deep rock pool. High sides and I couldn't get out of it. After spending what felt like 5 minutes, but it probably wasn't, getting pushed underwater when trying to scramble onto the rocks, not reaching anything worth grabbing onto and getting cut from them because of the heavy waves. I just resorted to screaming and thinking I was probably genuinely going to drown. I didn't know what to do. Then some random guy who happened to be in the area spearfishing came up and dragged me out. 6 years ago I was laying in a hospital bed for 24 hours while the tests came back to tell me what kind of leukemia I had. I told my wife and my parents to go home and sleep that night. I'm very thankful for the nurse that was there when reality sunk in. She listened while I cried and said that I couldn't go yet because my wife is disabled and I have a boy that needs to go to college. Thankfully it turned out to be chronic myeloid leukemia and treatable by 1 pill per day. 90% chance to live into my 80s. I've been considered in remission since 2013. Edit. Thanks everybody. I'm a lucky man. Second edit. Chemotherapy drugs are expensive. If you're in the US and can't afford them, go to NEDIMES.org. The manufacturers have programs to reduce the cost or even make them free. If you have insurance, still check because there are programs where you don't have to pay your deductibles or copays out of pocket. I woke up and saw a huge protrusion in my ribs. I thought for sure it was a malignant tumor. Broke down then and there, only to find out later from the doctor that I had fractured my ribs and somehow not realized it. I can imagine you being reduced to a whimpering pile in front of the doctor and he was just like, nah bro. That time when we slid down that glacier face and went down and down, faster and faster until my ex's ice pick and a tree stopped us. FCK that. My ice climbing days are done. Getting prepped for a neurosurgery that could wreck me in itself. I was getting an IV of antibiotics and waiting on the anesthesiologist to put me under. My whole family was there. We were talking and trying to comfort my wife who was having a hard time with it. She's holding my hand crying. Mom and dad trying to hold it together behind her. She looks up at me and I see her go ghost white. First I thought she was going to faint. At the same point I noticed my dad run out of the room rather quickly. And that's when it started. Super cold but start pouring sweat. Followed by breathing problems. My throat is swelling shut. Hives everywhere. All in a matter of 45 seconds. In rushes at least 5 nurses and 3 doctors plus anesthesiologist. Doc tells me I'm allergic to the IV so they have to put me out. Now. I didn't even get to tell her I loved her. I was trying to say the words but couldn't, and as the darkness crept in, it was the first time the fear of death set in. Well, how did it go? Did you survive? I must know. I was struck by lightning. It blew me off my feet, paralyzed me and knocked me unconscious. While I was unconscious I was semi-aware. Not in an awake and talking way. More of a lucid dreaming type of way. Peaceful and calm. All I could see was blackness and falling stars. kinda like the green scrolling numbers on the Matrix. Before I came to, I honestly thought that was what death was. Edit. Wow, this story blew up. Thanks for all the questions and concern, guys. Very kind of you. Edit 2. If you have questions, keep them coming. I'll do my best to answer them all. When I was a child, I wanted to bungee jump, and I had a play set in my backyard with a climbing rope. Once on the second story of the play set, I got the rope that led to the ground, but I couldn't get it properly tied around my waist, so I tied it around my neck and jumped off. Luckily somehow I didn't snap my neck, but then I was left hanging there. My feet couldn't reach the ground. I remember trying to stretch my toes to reach and clawing, trying to use my hands to get some room to breathe, but I couldn't. I realized I was going to die. Luckily I had a friend over who ran inside to get my mom, and she was able to get me down, which I don't really remember. I do remember the rope burn I had around my neck for days though. Edit. I'm a girl, doesn't really matter. F-king kids, goddammit. Leave them outside for 15 minutes and they hang themselves. Began choking on some gummy worms at a friend's party. Everyone thought I was joking, and I was hopelessly trying to cough it out for a good minute or two before my friend karate chopped me on the back when he realized I was actually choking. I was scared shitless at the time. Thought I was done for. Back in my junkie days, I was drinking heavily and doing oxycodone and noticed that I wasn't able to breathe normally and could only gasp in big gasps of air. That lasted a good long time before I could breathe again. Was pretty sure I was gonna die there. Don't do drugs. As I was upside down and everything was going in slow motion when I rolled my car. I'm still here though and had no injuries whatsoever. Wear your seatbelts, kids. It boggles my mind that people don't wear seatbelts. A little discomfort for a lot of safety. I first read that as when I was in the upside down. Stage 4 mouth cancer. Jaw amputated. Still alive. No sign of more cancer yet. Got a piece of steak stuck down my throat. Needed the Heimlich, which my dad performed. Scary stuff. I finished the steak. I was in the ICU and the severe infection that landed me there also caused swelling of the brain. It was the worst pain I've ever experienced and I was actually wishing for death. I drank a whole house cup of straight up whiskey at once. I was born with spinal muscular atrophy type 2, so I have a really weak respiratory system. Not too long after I finished that drink I needed to cough but was quickly losing consciousness and I blacked out. As I was blacking out though, I was fully aware of what was going on and could feel myself slowly losing the ability to breathe and how painful it was. Tried swimming across the Menai Strait, almost drowned, made it to the bank about 2 miles for where I started. Was a long walk home. Was constipated for 5 days. Walked up 5 floors to my room to look for meds to take when every step I took had me wanting to scream. Had to call my boss to carry me down and take me to the hospital. Remember to shti people. I ate massive shti while shredding on my Razor scooter back in the day. The handlebars twisted so they were sticking straight up as I went down and I landed on my throat. The pain was unbelievable and I couldn't breathe for what felt like forever. I finally shook it off and was able to ride home. I never told my mom about that, fearing that she would take away my scooter. 7-year-old me was a badass. I cannot think of a better way to go out as a 7-year-old tbh. Shredding on a Razor and wiping out. You'll be school legend for years to come. Extra cred. Got pinned down by repeated RPG fire which probably only lasted for about 15 minutes. Sounds short, but felt like eternity. They all sounded like they were landing right on top of us and we had no cover except a roadside ditch. I was pretty sure that was it. Took a while to lose the shakes after that one. RPG fire is one of the scariest sounds ever. 15 minutes? That's a goddamn eternity. I was roofied at a party. Besides not being able to f-king move and vomiting uncontrollably, my blood pressure and body temp tanked. It took an hour for me to get to a hospital. And God, was that bad. I genuinely thought I was going to die and came to peace with it. This was a week ago. Iraq USMC. Got knocked down by an RPG blast ridiculously close to me after an IED. Disabled our vehicle. Lost my rifle. Was being sprayed by AK fire. Ears ringing. Barely conscious. Army Black Hawk shows up and quells enemy fire. Buddy pulls me to safety. I thought I would for sure be killed. Good times. Getting rushed from a normal room in the emergency room into the resuscitation bay whilst having a really bad asthma attack was pretty bad. I was ODing, throwing up uncontrollably and in and out of consciousness. The whole time all I could think of how my family was going to find out what a loser I was. Their last thought of me. The next morning when I came to, I packed what I could fit in my car and moved back to my hometown. I decided to get clean cold turkey. I was going to remember the ugly side of detoxing so I'd never walk down that path again. I've been 5 years sober since. Woke up one morning unable to breathe without severe pain in one lung and coughing up blood. Called the NHS advice number for over the phone checkup. And they were gonna send me an ambulance. But I live a 10-minute walk from a hospital so still walked instead. They x-rayed it and found a massive infection in the affected lung. I got amoxicillin and anti-inflammatory drugs. Also, I couldn't sleep in my bed for a whole week because it put too much pressure and caused too much pain in the affected lung. So I had to try sitting in the single seat couch with leg rest every night. TLDR, I had pneumonia and nearly lost a lung, died. I told my wife I quit drinking soda because she was on my ass about it. A few months later we hop in the car and I realize I forgot to toss out the Coke can in the car's coaster. Cliff diving in Indonesia. Couldn't find the proper place that was listed everywhere so we jumped somewhere that looked like a clear jump. Friend jumped in. I jumped in and we couldn't get back up the cliff anymore due to massive waves beating us back towards the big cliff behind us. The cliff we wanted to get back up on was made of sharp volcanic rock so that didn't help. Eventually, exhausted, we got up at a calm moment. Couldn't stand anymore. Legs dead from keeping me from drowning. Not a very exciting story but one I hope others won't experience. Took 3 scoops of C4. A pre-workout supplement. Which is equivalent to 500 milligrams caffeine. Was certain I was about to go into cardiac arrest in the gym. Went into the bathroom and sat on the floor unable to move for an hour. Never exceed 1 scoop. Kids. 9-year-old me. Didn't know how to swim yet. Ventured into the deep waters of a river. Was about to drown. Being held at knife point by a robber. When I was walking around New York with my headphones in the distance I heard someone screaming "You stop." Full stop. I thought it was for someone else. Until a car zoomed past me, barely hitting me by mere centimeters. There was a cute girl next to me so I kept my emotional overload completely internal and walked away with a straight face. People that didn't answer actually did die. Being stuck in a 12x12 room with 6 other people during the eruption of Mt. Pinatubo. Tons of 5.0 greater earthquakes. Super Typhoon Yuna hitting us. It was like the end of the world and a very long 24 hours. I opened my eyes when I felt the driver's side wheels drop off the interstate pavement into the median. The driver of the big truck was frantically turning the steering wheel to the right. As the cruise control was still on, I could feel the truck accelerating back towards the interstate. As we approached the shoulder on the right side, I felt the truck begin to squat before the approaching rollover. And then I woke up in the hospital all f***ed up. I asked about the driver and all they would say was he didn't come there. It turned out that I was ejected at 75 miles per hour and was found underneath the hood of the truck after it had attached with multiple broken ribs, head wounds, the tops of both feet gone, collapsed lung, and my right bottom eyelid and cheek rebuilt after surgery. Then I had to make the phone call to my girlfriend 5 states away. When the MX-80 I was riding skidded on loose dirt around the irrigation ditch and I backflipped in. I was underwater for a period of time, no idea how long, but I managed to man the bike off me. My forearms are all scarred up from hot parts. I honestly thought I was going to die in that ditch at 14. Ate a KFC biscuit and forgot to order a drink. Getting hit head on by a semi-truck. Good God. You in a better mindset these days? Sleep paralysis. I have experienced SP many times before. But this time it was way different, so I didn't recognize it as SP but thought I was dying. I felt this immense pressure weighing down on me. And I couldn't breathe. As the pressure increased I felt myself slipping away under it, if that makes sense. So that's when I thought, okay, this is it then. Getting pulled over by a pair of Zimbabwean police officers in the middle of nowhere. They wanted money and had assault rifles. No cell service. No other cars in the past 50 miles. I had everything I owned at the time in the car. When I took my Adderall abuse a little too far. It was to do with my heart. And so much of it was just in my head. Right after I gave birth to my daughter. I had a postpartum hemorrhage and they couldn't stop the bleeding. I remember overhearing the doctor saying, I can't stop this bleeding, so we need to call a rapid response now in case she crashes. Next thing I know my daughter was taken off me and whisked away. I heard alarm sound and then about 10-15 doctors suddenly appeared around me. To stop me from bleeding out and dying, the doctor had to shove his whole arm up inside me and physically grab onto my uterus and squeeze it while a nurse pushed down on the outside of my stomach. I kept asking if I was going to die and nobody would give me an answer. I was absolutely f***ing certain I was going to die and I was screaming out to my partner to give our daughter a kiss and tell her I love her and that I loved him. The bleeding slowed down but I was taken straight to emergency surgery to stop it completely. I was fine but needed a few blood transfusions and an iron transfusion. 17 years old. Watching a movie in my then girlfriend's living room. Her parents were supposed to be out of town. Long story short. Her father walks into the house as I was getting ready to slide home. Let me tell you. The last thing a 6'4", 275 pounds of solid muscles Indian man wants to walk in on is his naked daughter about to get penetrated by a white guy. 30 years later. I still don't have 100% hearing in my left ear and can't breathe through my nose. Worst beating I've ever gotten in my entire life. Please tell me that guy was arrested for assault. There's no excuse to beat someone that bad unless you were trying to kill his daughter. I was swimming in a tidal pool at a water park. I dived down and when I went up for air a large man was above me. Somehow he didn't care about me putting my hands on his ass. Trying to push him aside. Eventually he got the message just in time. I love experimenting with products like pens, staplers, some electrical appliances, opening them and fixing them back. One day, a few years ago, 14-year-old me saw that a wire extension plug's button is kinda loose. I pulled out the appliance connecting to it and took out the cap of the button, but the extension is still connected to the power source. There was a piece of metal in it. And I don't know why my brain went, oh maybe it's a good idea to touch it. Even though I knew that the power is switched on. So I touched it. Right after. My arm went numb and I immediately pulled my hand back. I was like, wow. I almost died but it makes me feel alive. Last year iCopyright Earring was driving to my grandparents for Thanksgiving and iCopyright Earring was on the interstate and iCopyright Earring started fishtailing at 70 miles per hour. And the second before iCopyright Earring hit a tree that abruptly stopped my car. iCopyright Earring thought OFCK. I was scuba diving 3 years ago doing my open water training course. The instructor told me to take off my mask, part of the course, in the sea. At 20 meters. I took off my mask and I panicked. I started breathing from my nose instead of my regulator, mouth. My mind stopped for 5 seconds. I didn't know what to do and I can't see anything, which makes things harder to understand. That moment I knew I f'd up. It was my first time thinking oh shit, I am gonna die moment. Luckily, I was telling myself not to panic and stay calm, which made me understand what was happening.